And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 5280 podcast. I'm Glenn Hauser, joined by Cam Parker and Gage Madrid tonight. Mike is off doing Mike things, which is probably best that we don't ask specifics, honestly. But how are you fellas doing tonight?
Doing good. As far as Mike's concerned, just don't ask, don't tell.
Right, exactly. Don't ask, don't tell.
Don't ask because he'll tell us. Right.
Yeah, right.
He'll tell us too.
Or better yet, he could be multitasking, be at this meeting, and be streaming us at the exact same time. It could happen. It could happen.
As we're working on the list of topics for tonight, it's like, all right, this is kind of a thin week. I think I'll
right.
Trying to dodge it.
Right.
Trying to dodge us, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, and if anything, and Glenn and I talked about this, if anything, like free agency's hit its clear dead period. There's nothing going on. If anything, you're kind of scrambling, kind of creating, news, if you will, through the draft. And even then, some of that news that's the draft is either team visits or, self-created rumors or rumors that get created, like in this draft season, whether it's smokescreen season or actual real season when this draft. So it's like, it's such a dead period to where you're kind of scrambling, creating topics.
Oh yeah.
Right.
You're like trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel for something to make content about.
Right.
Absolutely. But, one of the things that we definitely need to lead off with is it's official. In less than 2 weeks, we are going to see the new Broncos uniforms. The Broncos social media team, once again, stepped up their game. They're not trailing the Chargers by too much these days anymore. And we even were treated to, if treated is the right word, is Miles with his robe swinging open like the old Rodney Dangerfield stories we used to hear about. But that was a great video, and it seems like the common theme with the Broncos uniforms is that people are cautiously optimistic. They're excited but scared at the same time.
Yeah, I'm definitely nervous. I will admittedly say I'm definitely nervous. And we should again kind of clarify, it's not a full complete rebrand of the the uniform. Like the logo isn't changing, and the colors are going to be staying the same. So we should again clarify that. So I guess that maybe that's one of the reasons why maybe people are kind of panicking to a certain extent, because it's like, well, now wait a minute, is that really a rebrand then? If you guys are doing this whole New Jersey concept, so yeah, but it's exciting because it's the things that maybe we've talked about before. It's like, I didn't mind the jerseys that we had, right? But kind of like to the Rockies to a degree, of like you had those uniforms for over 20 plus years. The Broncos have had these uniforms for 20 plus years. There's new ownership in the building. Something's got to give, and of course, uniforms, we're a part of that, and of course, we know that the stadium may soon not, if you will, follow. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun, exciting time.
I think there's always that element of nervousness whenever Nike's in charge of redesigning a uniform. They have some good ones whenever they've gone back to like the Broncos' previous redesign. They were fully in creative control of that. But then you look back at 2013 when they redesigned the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers uniforms. And then the following year, they redesigned the Cleveland Browns uniforms. And basically, all three of those teams just turned back the clock and went almost back to what they had before, save for Jacksonville. But they just stripped everything down to the bare bones. You look at the Houston Texans leaks. I got to be honest, I'm not quite sold on those. And then you also look at, the Atlanta Falcons recently. That kind of makes you a little nervous. But then you look at Cardinals, that's another one too,
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, Nike has just consistently got it wrong so many times. I think we've heard by now a lot of leaks as to what these uniforms are going to look like, but still, you almost have that worry Nike's going to mess it up.
It sounds like you're thinking that if Nike's doing the uniforms, it's like when you're on an airplane and you find out that Boeing constructed it.
Yeah, I still think kudos to my co-host that's with the mainly Broncos podcast. I still think one of the best ideas that they ever could have done was don't even like tease that they're possibly even doing new uniforms. And actually do the uniform release on draft night so that the new draft pick that the Broncos select, whoever it was going to be, quarterback or whoever, holds up the new uniform,
And that's how they reveal
and
it.
that's how they reveal it. The only thing there is, you just better pray that the jerseys don't suck, because if they do suck, you're talking about maybe the worst reveal of all time, and two, for one, if it's not a quarterback, then that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not a quarterback, it's a problem. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things. I don't foresee that would ever happen, just because they want to have them get the mileage of being, the lead story on, some of these NFL shows or on SportsCenter, where the uniform is being shown off and such. But that would be a pretty bold move. That would be cool. So,
well, I guess the other degree of that is you would also, because it's Roger Goodell, right? They meet Roger Goodell on stage, and I think he's the one that holds the jersey, right? So like they would have to tell Roger, do not take this out by any means. Like try and hide it the best possible way you can. And even for like the TVs and making sure like, hey, let's try and hide this in any simple way. So yeah, it's creative. It is definitely creative. You just wonder if it would have ever worked out that way.
It's like, Roger, you need to protect this like it's a Jerry Jones paternity test.
Or you will actually get booed on stage.
Oh, man.
Welcome, Ray. Thanks
for
joining us. So speaking of draft night, which is just short of 2 weeks away, and it can't come soon enough for our tastes, certainly. The visits are starting to sprinkle in, and we're getting a little word about who the Broncos are meeting with, and what are some of the names that you are excited about, and what are some of the names that you hope to hear from?
It's interesting. I think it's been to a certain degree kind of across the board, but I think that a fair amount of the names that I think when you're kind of looking at it, maybe day 3 selections, possibly day 3 selections into UDFAs, and I think that the one thing in breaking it all down is maybe the Broncos are, and Sean Payton and Rager and the entire scouting department is, maybe they're just getting a leg up on their UDFA. So like if these players aren't necessarily available, come their draft board and draft selection, maybe these are like leg ups in the sense of like, let's get them at least interested in us. So like once the draft is over with, we are going to end up being a high priority for them. And then obviously we all know the compensation rolls within that. And so you wonder if, maybe some of those guys that if they are end up, being UDFAs that do sign with us, what's the compensation, right? Because I think that's one of the biggest things that does follow is like, well, the Broncos signed, so-and-so to a rather large contract, and maybe they are going to be the ones that actually ends up, signing, with the team and, making the team and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And if you just think about the Broncos' significant history of being able to develop UDFAs, I think that that's a very smart approach to use these top 30 visits, because you've already visited with a lot of these guys, Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, Combine. What's up, Boggins? Yes.
Birthday boy. Happy birthday, man.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Dude. Yes, we were having some Michael Penix talk before the stream started for sure. But yeah, man, I lost my train of thought thinking about Michael Penix. So
and Boggins, like Olaf said, all good things, all good things.
All good things. All good things. You were talking about UDFAs and the Broncos making hay with UDFAs.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you think about guys like Jaleel McLaughlin, Jaquan McMillan. The Broncos have had such a significant history over the last couple of years, and then just historically developing UDFAs. If I am an undrafted free agent, trying to prioritize, okay, where do I want to go that will give me the best opportunity to develop into a starting caliber player, I think that the Denver Broncos could be an intriguing option.
Yeah. And I think that when you look at just in the simple point of like Sean Payton and his staffs and developing players, I think that it's one of the other reasons why maybe, UDFAs would be really well suited and going to be, coached by Sean. And, I think it'll be interesting to see what the future will hold for a guy like a Jaleel McLaughlin, right? But it certainly seems like, Payton is, a bit, high on McLaughlin. And so I think that it's going to be kind of curious to see what a role will be in 2024. But, like that, it's going to be an exciting thing because I think that, the running back class, it's not deep by any means, but do they even, bring in a running back necessarily in this draft? I think it's going to be very, very curious to see how they attack that. And, even if they don't, bringing in a guy that's a UDFA, it's got to be, fun for them to develop a guy like that.
For sure.
And Jaleel, go ahead. I was going to say Jaleel is really the poster child for like how an undrafted free agent really should be coming in, because the one thing that they all said was first guy in, last to leave, hardest worker out there, wanted to learn, tried so hard, spent all the time in the facility, and really that was the difference. I think he really stood out, just his work ethic alone, and it gave him a little bit of mileage, a little bit of credits, and in the bank there as far as who are we going to keep in these last few cuts. And I think I do foresee that he's going to have a significant role in this offense moving forward, and it's his work ethic is key. So any of these undrafted free agent players, they should really be paying attention to a guy like him. And Gage, you even said it just now, is that these opportunities are there. These positions do need some depth, and the Broncos, not only with the money that they can throw at these guys, but the opportunity, those things go hand in hand.
It's just a fantastic way to fill your roster with low-risk, high-reward players that cost virtually nothing. I mean, even an expensive UDFA deal is peanuts compared to what the rest of the guys are getting paid. So
called it.
Oh my God! Blech.
Called it.
For the UFL, baby.
Phil Hartman, rest in peace. Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, seriously.
Maybe he's talking about Phil Hartman.
But yeah, man, I don't know. I just feel like this is a great opportunity for the Denver Broncos to sort of round out their roster through undrafted free agency, and it's a great opportunity for players as well.
Yeah, and just the running back class in general. Some of the players that it seems like maybe they're interested in, or that they're possibly going to have for a top 30 visit. Ray Davis from Kentucky was actually in that mix. As far as a player that they might actually be interested in. Ray Davis actually wasn't necessarily the only one. It seems like at the combine or even a top 30 visit, it seems like maybe the Broncos are showing interest in Jalen Wright. And Jalen Wright is a very fascinating one with Tennessee. And we know that the Tennessee connection, with Sean Payton is rather strong and a rather successful one at that, because we know that Alvin Kamara has come from the Tennessee Volunteers. So maybe dipping a little bit back into the volunteering himself again with those Tennessee football program and going out and maybe getting another Alvin Kamara, might be the best way to go. It's going to be a fun one to follow. And the other thing too is when you pair it, this whole visits thing, and then being interested, you pair it with George Payton, you circle back to the Pat Surtain draft, right? They never even met with him. They never even talked with him. They never even had, at least for Surtain, had any inkling that they were actually interested in him. And then they, come across to the board, and he's a Denver Broncos, and he's the best football player on the roster, as it is currently constructed right now. So, I think that's the other side of this, is like, well, what is this chess and checkers, situation going on with the Broncos? And Are these just, making it seem like, they're interested in these players when in reality, it's not what they say, it's actually what they do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a big saying in this business. But I want to pivot it back to the running back conversation for just a second, because I feel like the Broncos would be really wasting an opportunity here to add to that room if they don't draft a running back or bring a couple in through UDFA. You think about someone like Javonte Williams coming off of that injury, didn't really produce at the level we needed him to produce at last year. You think about Samaje Perine on an expiring deal, somebody who had a really nice niche role in our offense last year as a receiving back. And then you think about Jaleel McLaughlin, somebody who, has shown flashes, but kind of has also been limited in his role at points at the end of the season because you can't really trust him in pass protection. He's a little bit small in his frame. I think this is an opportunity where the Broncos need to add somebody who can emerge as an alpha amongst a bunch of betas right now, in my opinion. Obviously, Javonte, when he's healthy, has proven to be an alpha, but the last couple of years, unfortunately, that has not been the case.
Do you see a chance that he does not make this team this year?
I do
Javonte?
actually. Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It as sad as it is, and it's funny you asked that because in our predominantly orange chat, one of the guys actually asked that question. Do you like today in the last 45 minutes, do you actually see a situation where he's even on the roster in 2025? And it's like, I don't, because if you do look at the class, and even then them going out and being rather high on a guy like a Jaleel McLaughlin, I think what will be a trigger for something like that would be, well, who do they target, right? Like, who do they target in this class? So say they go out and get a Jalen Wright or a Bucky Irving or
a Dylan Laube.
A Dylan Laube, or even, an Isaac Guriendo or a Braylon Allen, especially if they go out and they draft Braylon Allen, you're more often than not, reading the tea leaves of Javonte may not be here for long. And the unfortunate situation is because of his injury and everything, because you add Braylon to this mix and, he's definitely different than, a lot of the backs on that roster, but he's a big, bruising, athletic, running back. I kind of compared a little bit to AJ Dillon to a degree, and it's like, he's kind of like that way. I mean, but I think that's the other part of this is it seems like Sean Payton and especially George Payton have really prioritized running back in the past, right? And whether that's been day 2 or even very early day 3, so it's definitely something that's going to be worth monitoring for sure.
I take a look at the 49ers philosophy in the pre-Christian McCaffrey days. Even when they had established talent in that room, like Raheem Mostert, they still consistently added to that pipeline in the draft because if you think about it, running back is the most volatile position in the NFL, or one of. I mean, you could lose your starter at any given time, and you need somebody who can replace that level of production. And I think running back is the easiest position to find high-level production in the later rounds of the draft. So that's why I say never spend a premium pick on a running back unless it's a true difference maker, like a CMC or a Saquon Barkley, somebody of that nature at that position. And even then, you're taking a gamble with it because both of those players have had significant injury histories playing that volatile running back position. That's why even if you have an established guy in the building, you continue to build on that talent and add to that pipeline each and every single year through the draft. And I think that's the philosophy the Broncos should take, even if they find their guy this year in the draft or one of the guys they already have in the room emerges. Keep drafting backs, keep signing backs as UDFAs because you never know when they might come in handy.
Right.
And if you think about it, I mean, they traded up in the second round to get Javonte Williams. And that was one of those cool backstories where Albright had heard intel that the Dolphins were going to draft him. So he apparently mentioned it to someone in the know, and the trade was subsequently made. But one of the, at the time, and then after his first season, it seemed like a great deal.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, after the injury and, just being totally worn out at the end of this year, which is completely understandable. I mean, anything we're saying about Javonte is not a knock on him personally or as a player. I mean,
Yeah.
for him to come back is just unbelievable in that time frame. And it's just almost to be expected that the energy level would not be where it was at the start of the season at the end for somebody in that position. But I'm with you and I'm with Boggins. Like you cannot spend top 100 pick, especially when we're so bottom heavy as far as where our picks are located this year.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, with the post draft signings.
It's unfortunate that we're having this conversation because we all like Javonte as a person and as a player, but this is the reality of the situation, man. He suffered a multi-ligament knee injury, and the data and the science suggests that he's never going to be the same player that he was pre-injury. I hope I'm wrong because I really want Javonte to go back to being the dominant force that he was in 2021. But right now, the Broncos need to have contingency plans in place in the event that does not happen.
Yeah, and if anything, that is, a positive that's in favor of Javonte, just the fact he finished the year.
Yes.
Like, just the fact he finished the year without sustaining a very massive injury is a huge win for him. Like, so if I'm Javonte, I'm, taking, that, and really, using that as a big positive going forward within this year. So the fact that you came back from a really nasty injury, you finished the season, and to Boggan's point, you are going to be in the second year of this system. I think it's going to end up being better for you. And as we said, it's going to be fascinating to see what they do in this class, because if they don't address running back, maybe even at all, I think it's going to, or I should say, maybe even depending on the back, because maybe even like a Braylon Allen necessarily isn't replacing Javonte Williams, and he's actually replacing more like a Samaje Perine.
Sure.
Right. So I think that like that's the other kind of wrinkle to all of that. And we all know too that much like the whole Russell Wilson thing, Sean Payton didn't handpick Javonte Williams. And that's just the other unfortunate thing with this. As much as it was a trade up, and to a certain degree, I know people have said this, and it's the right answer. Pat Surtain is George Payton's baby. Well, to a degree, Javonte Williams might actually even be, Payton's baby, in the sense that like he traded up for him into the second round. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that all unfolds.
And quite honestly, this is a conversation that the fans of every team could be having, because the days of one guy being the stud, Tony Dorsett just had his 70th birthday the other day. The guy was the lead back for his entire career up until the very end. Those days are over. I mean, do you guys see that any back getting to 8,000 yards for their career, in the coming years, or just with the tandems that nobody's going to have that opportunity?
It's hard to say.
How close is Derrick Henry?
Yeah. I mean,
like that's the only one I could think of, because CMC has dealt with, I think, too many injuries.
Yeah. I mean, Derrick Henry would be the one, and especially when you consider his landing spot. I mean, it would be, one maybe depending on how long he lasts there. I think that's actually maybe one of the more impressive things about Derrick Henry is that, I think that, when you look at it, like his durability and the last as long as he has with his size and athleticism, maybe there actually is a chance where he's one of the few guys that actually hits the 8,000 yards. Saquon Barkley probably could have, if he didn't sustain, multiple injuries and everything, so it'll be interesting to see certainly what follows with Philadelphia. But we know that with Philly, or just even Barkley there, he won't necessarily be just running the ball, right? So, I mean, like it'll also be him as a receiving threat. So I'm very curious to see, what happens.
Cam, this comment from Boggins, I'm sorry, Gage. We have an Ingram, Sproles, but no Kamara. Cam, this comment seems right up your alley, actually.
Yeah, well, because I think that like I feel like maybe the more you break it down, the Mark Ingram comparison for Javonte actually feels appropriate. because, I do kind of see it in the way that like Mark Ingram type back, where you're just a big, or you're a physical running back that is just going to be carrying defenders, and just very reliable after the catch. I think is, so maybe to that degree, I think that like maybe bodes well for a guy like, a Javonte Williams. And for a Sproles, we know who the Sproul is in that room. That would be a Jaleel McLaughlin, right? But I think that maybe he's just got to develop a little bit more in the passing game, right? And obviously, maybe use a little bit more in pass protection, bulk up a little bit more. So maybe Kamara, I don't know, maybe the Broncos do go to Tennessee and go get themselves a Jalen Wright. So I mean, maybe they do that. I think that of all the things that I feel like I'm just so excited for is if he can get his hands on a guy like Giriendo. I'm thinking about, I just dream about that fit, with Isaac Giriendo. I just he's so athletic. Basically he's just like he's a more athletic version of Devontae Booker, like to a degree, right? I mean, like, so I'm really curious to see if he can get his hands on a guy like that. But I mean, hey, we'll certainly see.
I think that when we look at what Sean Payton likes in a running back, we all know he loves his jokers. He loves somebody who can split out wide as a receiver, somebody who can be effective in pass protection, and somebody who can be a physical, aggressive runner. So I think that we have to look at who are the most versatile backs in this class, and we could probably zero in on those players as to who Sean Payton might target. I have not evaluated running backs yet. That's kind of the one position I put on the back burner. It's one that's like, okay, you're going to find talent later on in the draft. I'll evaluate that after the fact, but so I don't really know who would check that box, but that is the mold of who Sean Payton would want in a running back.
And you know what? I am really looking forward to all of this conversation coming to a head, and they really prioritize the running back position, and they draft a running back at 12. I'm really looking forward to them drafting a running back with their 12th overall pick. Maybe like a Jonathan Brooks, at pick 12 or something. Or maybe maybe they actually go with the Jalen Wright at pick 12. I think that I'm really looking forward to the day when Twitter will really crumble, or Boggins can just absolutely crumble, at the notion that they take Jonathan Brooks or at pick 12. I'm looking forward to that.
After they trade their Pat Surtain to go
right,
up and
exactly.
Get Michael Penix at 4.
How many people thought, what percentage of people thought you were serious that day, Ken?
A lot of people. I was so surprised. There were so many people that actually thought it was serious, when there were a few little, tweaks here and there, in the draft. One, I was going with more clever names, and two, Michael Penix at 4. I really do like Penix, but not at 4. And I really will say, I think that the running back at 12 was probably the one for me. If it wasn't Penix at 4, the running back at 12 should have been it. Especially knowing my history of, should I say, getting into it a little bit with Melvin Gordon, if you will.
Alex, welcome back, man. Long time no see. Comes back with a vengeance on Twitter, by the way.
Exactly. He's back on Twitter.
So, we've been speculating for weeks now. We're getting excited, and we just have no idea really what's going to happen, what teams are going to move up, what teams are going to pass on position players that we thought for sure they were going to take. Do you guys have any sort of draft predictions that you think that are maybe kind of out of the box a little bit, maybe will surprise some people? What have you come up with any that you thought were kind of off the wall a little bit?
Well, it's funny.
Glenn, you had a very spicy one. I think we should save that one for last, because that one's so good.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say that it would be very surprising, maybe actually be maybe the wrong word for something like this, but just given the Raiders' history, I would not be the least bit surprised, and that would be, again, not to piss Boggins off on his birthday, but Michael Penix to the Raiders at 13, I think would actually be a surprise. Like, it actually would be a surprise, the fact that he's going to 13. And actually, I will go a step further. Like I as he as he just comments in, because like that, I think the thing that is just so, it's hard for me to process this whole quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, and 4, and even going a step further and saying that there will be 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 13. That's just such a hard thing for me to process. So I don't think it's out of the box by any means, but I will say, that don't rule it out. And so if there is a surprise, 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 13.
That would be unprecedented. Gage, what are you thinking?
Mine had also involved Michael Penix. It was a little less spicy, though. I think that he's going to end up with the Seattle Seahawks. I actually think that he's going to be reunited with Ryan Grubb, his old OC over there at UW. I think it's a perfect fit, and it would be a very interesting quarterback room with Geno Smith, Sam Howell, and Michael Penix Jr. Penix is beloved in the city of Seattle. I think that's one that could very easily happen. Another one that I am going to go out on a limb and say, J.J. McCarthy will be a Denver Bronco in 2 weeks' time.
Is that are we doing the Babe Ruth? Are we calling our shot? Is that what we're doing?
That is my bold prediction, is that Sean Payton is going to do whatever he has to do to go get J.J. McCarthy.
See, what we've just done is now we've officially had Boggins log off this entire stream, because not only did I say that Penix to the Raiders, you had Penix to the Seahawks, so we know exactly where Boggins lives down there in the Pacific Northwest. He's just he
just threw his cake out the window.
Yeah.
He did take a slice first, though. So mine is, I could actually foresee this happening, and I would love it to happen, and it would make the Vikings GM executive of the year before even May started. But my prediction is that Minnesota is not going to they're not going to sit still. And what they're going to do is they're going to package their 2 first-round picks in a deal with the Patriots to move up to 3rd. There are going to be other considerations, of course, but they're going to get their quarterback at 3rd. They're then going to package Justin Jefferson in a deal with the Cardinals for the 4th pick, get Marvin Harrison Jr. in a package there. And so they're going to get their franchise quarterback and their franchise wide receiver on rookie deals for 5 years without, and not having to deal with Justin Jefferson turning down $30+ million a year.
That's crazy.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Like, that would be very, very
cool. League up.
Yeah. I think as far as one of the ones that I think would be, I guess, maybe a surprise, maybe to a degree, I think would be Minnesota doesn't even trade up necessarily, but they don't take the quarterback at all, in this class, and they actually stay put at pick 11 and 23, and they just address the roster as a whole. So I wouldn't even be surprised if because there's been so much conversation about quarterback, I wouldn't even be surprised if you're going to go surprise pick in the top 12. I wouldn't be surprised if there is if there's an edge rusher going to the Minnesota Vikings, given the fact that they just lost out on, Daniel Hunter, right? And I know that a lot has been made, maybe even them going with maybe tackle or possibly even, maybe even corner. So I would not rule out a guy maybe like a Jared Verse, a Dallas Turner, possibly even going to Minnesota.
Well, on the subject of Jared Verse,
Yeah.
the Broncos did actually bring in Jared Verse, or they're going to bring him in later in the week for a top 30 visit. They did bring in the UCLA edge rusher Liatu Latu in for a top 30 visit. And Latu is a very interesting player in particular. PFF's highest graded edge rusher last year for college players. But the injury history is a little bit concerning. He missed 2020 and 2021 with a neck injury, but the past 2 years have been, I guess, a comparatively clean bill of health. So I'm really interested to see if the Broncos are indeed going to punt on a quarterback and go in the direction of a Verse or a Latu. Not saying I endorse that move, but that is something we should keep an eye on, considering they brought those players in for interviews.
Yeah.
So the Latu one is an interesting one to me because the real knock on Penix, and I'm a big fan of his, so I'm in Marcus's good graces still. You know, the big knock is that he had 2 seasons in a row when he was with Indiana where he was, and he was 6 games in both years where he was injured and out for the season. Latu was actually a neck injury and was told to retire from football and ended up getting cleared, coming back and having a very successful time. But you don't hear a lot about the same sort of reservations that people have with him versus Penix, and I'm just trying to figure that one out.
You know what's funny? And Boggins is in the chat, and even Gage, you help me out on this one. I tweeted today that I found it interesting about how maybe the comparisons and who they were as players, and it is a bit striking. The comparison of Latu, right, and comparing him to Jalen Phillips is actually pretty spot on, because I think people forget. Don't quote me on this. Engage in Boggins and Glenn, help me out here. But if I'm not mistaken, Jalen Phillips had the exact same thing happen to him, where when he was at UCLA, they actually, and with those injuries, they actually asked him to possibly retire from football. In fact, I think maybe he retired from football. And then he goes and he balls out with the University of Miami, or vice versa. I can't remember.
No, you're right.
Yeah. So the skill set, the way that they are, is so similar, and how they go out and rush the passer, that I would not hate the idea. And I think that the edge rusher position is something I've been warming up to in weeks and weeks, and I think that guys like Jared Verse, even Dallas Turner, and Latu, I think Latu, just his ability to just get to the quarterback at a consistent rate is one of the more compelling things for me. He's going to have to add a little bit more to his frame, and I think that one of the things that's caused a lot of people's concern for adding him to the room is, well, he's just a little bit too much like what they have in the room. A guy, maybe like a Nick Benito, or maybe a Jonathan Cooper, or whoever, just anybody that's in that room. Like, it's just been too much of like what they have in the room. Well, I'll tell you, if they have a player that is going to consistently get after the quarterback, that will be your Batman. If he can consistently get to the quarterback at a constant, clip. And I think that given his size, you can coach him up to be a little bit better of a prospect within the run defense. Latu is such a fascinating one, and I'm curious to see where he goes, because if we do talk about a trade down scenario, how far they go is specifically for a guy like Latu, I think will be very, very interesting. And given his neck injuries and stuff like that. So as much as we talk about the Bo Nix scenario, the Michael Penix scenario of trading down and getting, either one of those guys, the Latu scenario and getting him, and maybe even getting a quarterback into that second round and maybe even early third, I think is really appealing.
And there's a strong chance that Bo Nix and Michael Penix will both be there in the second round. So I think that is a very interesting and plausible scenario that the Broncos could look at here. Maybe trade down, get somebody like a Latu in the first round, and then maybe with like the 54th pick or something like that, I just pulled that number out of my head, you could get somebody with Bo Nix in like a trade down, like Bo Nix in a trade down scenario, you know? There are a lot of interesting avenues that the Denver Broncos could take. And if you're believing Benjamin Albright here, Bo Nix will be available in the second round unless some team out there really falls in love with him. Same goes for Michael Penix Jr. So that's a scenario I think that we could really keep an eye on here, because I have heard the argument that maybe somebody would want to come up and get a Nix or a Penix late in the first, so that way you'd have him on the fifth-year option. We heard that argument as well when Will Levis began to slide in the first round last year. That never happened. He slid into the second round. I could see a scenario like that here as well. So when it comes to Latu, I think he's got a very, very high ceiling, one of the highest ceilings in this edge rush class. Mm-hmm. And I think he could be a really, really special player here in Denver with the right coaching. I think that this team's done a really good job showing that they can develop their edge rushers. And I don't necessarily know if they have a player in that room who is of the talent caliber of a Latu. That's why I would be okay with it. But the Broncos would still have to end up with a quarterback somehow or another in that scenario.
Braylon Trice, of course, to anybody that has been living under a rock. Braylon Trice went to the University of Washington.
I mean,
and it's our Boggins, our resident UW fan.
That's right.
Well, I love how Cam is like smug about somebody pushing one college over another. You know, as he's wearing his Nebraska Cornhusker.
I'm smiling about it. Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, I got to at least do something, because you know there's probably a more often than not chance that a Nebraska player will not get drafted this year. So I got to at least do something to promote the brand.
So I got to ask you guys, what from a fan's perspective, what would be the worst case scenario for the draft for the Broncos this year?
Well, if you guys saw the video of a crocodile or gator outside of a facility, and them capturing a crocodile or gator, that would be me if the Broncos decided to take a cornerback at 12. That would be me as far as the worst case scenario, or better yet, since we're talking about trade down scenarios, they trade down and actually take a corner like a Nate Wiggins or a Kool-Aid McIndustry. But I will pour some cold water on my own take there, because I will say this: if there is one corner that I actually feel comfortable with, and if Sean Payne is really a big proponent, and Jim Leonard has been a big proponent about connections and stuff with that secondary, I would not rule out in the slightest Cooper DeJean being a Denver Bronco. I mean, he definitely could play some corner, but he's got some free safety to him. You can play him at safety. He played, obviously, as we know, with Riley Moss at Iowa.
Yeah, we already have Cooper DeJean at home, man.
So I would not be surprised if Cooper DeJean is a Bronco. And two, as I said, Jim Leonard, he spent so many countless games in the Big Ten, worrying about maybe a guy like or even being fascinated with about a guy like a Cooper DeJean and even a Riley Moss. So, I would imagine he's maybe convincing Sean as much as he can, maybe to consider a guy like DeJean.
That one's a tough sell for me, because you invested a premium pick in Riley Moss. You expected him to be a starter. If they take a corner ahead of basically the third round, even if they take one in the third round, you're basically admitting Riley Moss is a bust. That's what you're admitting. You're admitting that he's not going to be a starter for you. And that's another knock on George Payton's draft classes.
Yeah.
They have to give Riley Moss a shot here. He got no opportunity to play on defense last year. He played well on special teams, but I don't know if the fact that he couldn't get on the field ahead of Fabian Moreau is cause for concern or not.
Yeah. And like I said, the only reason why I'm intrigued with this idea is because of the whole, connections and everything that could work. If there's anything that could possibly work in the favor of them even developing a guy like a Riley Moss, it would be them taking Cooper DeJean, right? It would be them taking Cooper DeJean. Everything else, though, I'm just not a huge proponent of. And I think that the one thing that at least is maybe a cause for optimism for a guy like DeJean compared to McKinstry and Arnold and Wiggins and some of these other guys is like DeJean can actually play some safety for you.
Maybe we should
safety room.
Yeah, we do. And maybe we should look at some of the Iowa tight ends in the future, not necessarily always stick with cornerback.
There is one that's actually coming out this year. Eric Alt, I think, is his name.
Yeah, that'd be undrafted free agent. Is that what someone's happening? So, as far as I think worst case scenarios, if they draft a quarterback in the 3rd or 4th round, I think the fan base is just going to absolutely lose their mind. It's a very tough sell that you're not trying to rebuild, that, and that Stidham's going to be the guy. Prices to the tickets have continued to be jacked up year after year with the new ownership. I mean, people need to see that like shit's getting done and that people are really trying to right the ship and not make the same mistakes twice. I'm not saying sell the farm to move up and get somebody major, but they got to do something where they get a quarterback really in the first round, either at 12 or later on, and get a 2nd round pick in the meantime.
Yeah. And I think that's what's going to end up being fascinating because, obviously it's like anybody's flavor, for quarterback, within the top 6 and 7. But, at the end of the day, we're not in those, war rooms, we're not in those meetings. And so I think that like, if there's anybody, maybe the kind of, at least cause the fan base to maybe be somewhat confident to a degree, like the more time you maybe look into a guy like him, or maybe, and given his talent, would be maybe a guy like a Spencer Rattler. I think that like for a guy like Michael Pratt, I feel like you would have to be doing a little bit more digging on, if you will, to actually maybe be sold on a guy like that. If you're drafting a Michael Pratt, it could be a really hard sell. And I wouldn't even be surprised. Do I think it happens? No, I don't think it happens. But with the lack of capital that they have, I wouldn't be surprised too if they even took 2 quarterbacks in this class. Like I wouldn't even be surprised if they take 2. And I know we talked about that a while ago, of them even taking 2. But I wouldn't be surprised at the least. But if they took a guy, in the 1st or whatever, maybe at pick 12, and then because of the fact that they maybe were a bit risky at that pick 12, they maybe took a chance on a Joe Milton or a Jordan Travis or something.
Go down the 2012 Washington Commanders route.
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't be surprised at it. It's very unlikely, but I wouldn't be surprised.
So Alex says, thoughts on our team not being very good and using this year as trading down and just taking BPA. This team is devoid of talent. Next year, you're going on a shopping spree with a 2nd-year Jordan Travis. What do you think of this idea?
Here's my concern with just punting on quarterback, because that would probably BPA means you're punting on quarterback. Mm-hmm. And I've said this before. Sean Payton's a coach that has the tendency to overachieve. Even with a subpar roster, Sean Payton could easily win 7-8 games with Jarrett Stidham and this current roster. I could see it. I really could. If you do that, there's no guarantee you're going to have the 12th overall pick winning 8 games like you did this year. Normally, that equates more to like the 16th, 17th pick. It equates to more of like a mid-tier pick.
Basically where they are now.
Yeah. This is probably the best chance the Broncos have to bring a quarterback in to at least see if they can be that guy. Even if they don't trade up to get somebody in the top tier, if they were to land a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix, he at least gives the Broncos a window to see if that quarterback can work out, and it gives us some time to make this work with the fan base. Let's just be honest here. If they were to draft Michael Pratt, for example, a lot of casuals would have no clue who the fuck that is. Let's just be honest here.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. They'd probably know Spencer Rattler, a former 5-star recruit, but Michael Pratt,
Star-Lord.
Yeah, that would be one. You just can't sell that to this fan base. For me, though, what would be a worst case scenario, and it would almost be a repeat of what happened to the Broncos a few years ago. You take that quarterback, be it at 12 or even be it in second round, whatever, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, whoever it is, and you go into the second year, and if you give them that opportunity, if they haven't showcased that they can truly be an elite special player and there are better options ahead. The Broncos could have ended up with a better option in the 2019 draft or the 2020 draft, excuse me. They could have potentially gone up for a Justin Herbert or Tua maybe, but that's kind of a hindsight thing. I wouldn't have gone up for Tua, but they could have potentially been in a position to land one of those guys if they were to come up, but they wanted to double down and invest those resources into Drew Lock. They took Jerry Jeudy, and that came back to bite them as they poured those resources into Drew Lock. So if they take a quarterback this year and that quarterback doesn't show for sure that they can be the guy moving forward, then they shouldn't have the hesitancy to take another quarterback in 2025. So for me, worst case scenario would be if they repeated that same disaster again, because it brought us to where we are now.
And also going with KJ Hamler in the second round of that same draft. I mean, geez.
Jalen Hurts was in the second round of that year.
Yeah.
Jeremy Chin was too, and he was a Bronco favorite, of course, for a lot of people that wanted him. And even too, like I would be curious if I was to have a conversation with them and may pundit on it altogether, is what was the point of rolling all the money? Like what was the point of rolling all the money? If you don't necessarily want to build it around your young quarterback, right? Or your young quarterback, in 2025. And I think that, and I mean, it's their plan, and we don't necessarily know what that plan is. And it's one of the reasons, why we're having this conversation, right? And I think that but as crazy as it is, Sean Payton's a madman. I mean, he could punt on 2024 altogether, and then end up, getting the Dak Prescott, everything that people thought was a, crazy scenario. And he goes out and he actually pulls it off. He gets Dak Prescott, so the crazier things have certainly happened, but I just think that, to echo Gage a little bit, we're at this point where you have a Sean Payton in the building. He is a developer. He's never actually drafted a first round talent. And it's really time. It's time for you to invest in that quarterback. Really, at this point, it's like, I think the one argument you can maybe make about this class necessarily is like, maybe to a degree of a Michael Pratt is like, you can actually develop this guy. Like you can actually develop this guy, to be better than, a Jarrett Stidham. And so the fact that a Spencer Rattler is appealing, but that's ultimately why Rattler is appealing, Penix is appealing, Nix is appealing. Any of those top six, candidates are very appealing, because you put Peyton in that room with a guy like that, you will get possibly the highest ceiling, with a quarterback like that. So you may as well take your quarterback, build it around him in this class, because of the fact that it is such a very offensive heavy class. And if there is, to maybe Alex's point, a devoid of talent on this roster, maybe it is that offensive side of the ball. So you can almost like remake your entire room of the offensive line in terms of the tackle spot, the wide receiver room. You can double dip on wide receiver. You can maybe even go out and, get a tight end. I mean, obviously the Brock Bowers conversation has been hot and heavy, with the Denver Broncos. So, I mean, like they ultimately, they can go certain routes, but I just think that the fact that they don't address that quarterback position even at all, I think is going to be pretty concerning for fans.
Yeah.
Have you seen the latest rumor about Bowers that the Colts are considering trading up to draft him? I mean, that again would kind of throw a little, twist in the draft order before the Broncos make their selection.
Yeah.
Well, what if Bowers is available at 12? Maybe that's a trade up team with the Colts.
Right.
Possibly. But even then,
what are they at 16?
15.
15. Right. That's not bad. I mean,
well, and I think that it's one of the questions I think I posed a bit ago, like a week ago, or I can't remember when. When you get old, you lose some brain cells. But I just when I was posing the question, it was, if you were on the clock and quarterback was not your answer, and it was Rome Odunze and Brock Bowers, it's a hard conversation because it's one like I don't know who I'm taking, like because for Bowers, it's like I heard someone make the comparison to George Kittle, and I think it's actually an apropos comparison for a guy like that. But I also think the Kyle Juszczyk, funny enough, they're both 49ers. I think the Kyle Juszczyk comparison is maybe a more accurate one the more I kind of think about it. But I'm just very curious about, like, maybe for you guys, like, say they do stick at 12, but they don't go with, the quarterback route. How would you rank that? We just recently talked about edge, right? So I mean, like, how would you guys rank in terms of maybe your top choices for pick 12?
Bowers would be an interesting one because of just how versatile he is, and he's got the label of tight end, yes, but he can really be tight end, H-back. You can even split him out a little bit at receiver. You can do all kinds of different stuff with a Brock Bowers. So that one's intriguing. Wide receiver, pure wide receiver, for me is a hard sell just because of how deep this class is. So then I pivot back to edge rusher because that's also the more premium position. The three most premium positions for me in the NFL are obviously number 1 quarterback, number 2 edge rusher, and number 3 wide receiver. So if you can't get that quarterback, you have to go out and get that dominant edge rusher for me. But I would also seriously think about Brock Bowers because of all the different ways Sean Payton could utilize him. Again, he could be another one of Sean Payton's jokers. Yeah. Sean likes his versatility. He likes his jokers. So that could be a role there for Brock Bowers.
I've seen some people suggest that Broncos would go offensive tackle. And if their current lineup is still in place, I cannot foresee them using that pick on a tackle that is either not going to play or is going to make it obvious that they're trading bulls and you're not going to get what you really could get because your leverage is gone. Do you see tackle as being on the table at all?
I do. I do. Because I mean, like, to Alex's point, if they do go BPA, there's a very hard argument that there will be no better player or position that is going to be available than offensive tackle. And guys,
how would that play out though, Cam? Like, so they draft a tackle and you got McGlinchey, you got Bowles. What happens? Personally,
for me, the moment I draft that tackle, I'm trading Garrett Bowles. It's just that's just the sad and unfortunate
reality. I'd be fine with that.
That's just the sad and unfortunate reality of it. Because I can't see a rookie tackle, especially within this class, sitting in year 1. Like, I can't. And so, and look, to preface this, I'm not saying they're going to trade Garrett Bowles to the Tennessee Titans for the 38th overall selection that he's been running on these pro football, focus simulators. I'm not saying that.
You're getting like 3 picks for him.
Right, exactly. Well, look, to people that wants to clown me for this, like, sure, but like, just tell the simulators to stop accepting these trades and I'll actually, not actually go through with it. But
I saw some beat reporter actually suggest that some team, I can't remember who it was now, but trade like a first and a second for Garrett Bowles. And it's like, yes, please sign us up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, done. Hell,
You know,
if someone offers a second, I think you have to take a long, hard thought about it, because if you think about how much money Garrett Bowles could save by getting off the books, I think it's like $16 million. And wouldn't that money roll over into 2024?
yeah.
And you get
Yeah.
that second round pick. I mean,
Or into 2025, excuse me.
Yeah, well, and I think that it's one of the reasons why, and Engage and made this point, I think, a couple weeks ago, but it's one of the reasons why guys like Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles are guys that, as much as it feels like maybe they are safe on the roster right now as we sit on April 9th, they still don't feel all that safe because of the fact that your two deepest positions in this draft to target is offensive tackle and wide receiver. So you absolutely can go out and possibly replace a Cortland Sutton and then, go trade him to the Buffalo Bills, like for a day, an early day 3 pick, right? Maybe for like a 4th round pick or something, right? So, I mean, like, you can do that. Or frankly, because maybe the Bills are so desperate, you actually might be able to ooze out, maybe a 3rd round pick, another 3rd round pick that you can, move on up into the 2nd round. So I think that, just the idea that, like, if you do take that tackle, a guy like a Fatanu or a Fashanu, or maybe even a Fuaga at that point at pick 12, I would be very, very tempted, and very, very convinced that they should trade. And even then, I will say, and I made the comment before, is that even when Jerry Jeudy was on the roster, or even with Cortland Sutton, I don't necessarily even think the wide receiver, is off limits at pick 12 either. And I think that one of those players in particular is a guy like a Brian Thomas Jr. If Brian Thomas Jr. is fast moving up the board and he's one of those guys that you want to strongly consider with pick 12, I would not be opposed to it, because I think that, he's one of those players that, like, you could strongly consider. But I think that where I find myself probably salivating more to the idea of a wide receiver is your possibilities, I feel like, grow more in a trade back scenario for wide receiver because of guys like an A.D. Mitchell, a Troy Franklin, maybe even a Brian Thomas in that kind of scenario. Or even, a Xavier Worthy, if you can luck out, drafting a guy and not letting him go to the Kansas City Chiefs. But a Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, though, I know Alex is in the chat. He's going to love this one, but Ricky Pearsall is probably a name that I would want to file away as possibly, being a Bronco, because again, we talk about connection. Kerry Colbert was his wide receiver coach at Florida. So Pearsall is 100% a name I would be filing away if they're at least able to get a 2nd round pick.
So you had talked about rolling over the money, and at this point, the Broncos have a tremendous amount of open salary cap available, even with paying the remaining dollars towards Russell Wilson, not this season, but next year.
Don't tell the Bengals reporter that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the one that expects us to give away Pat Mahomes. But The Athletic recently put out the top free agents for 2025 as it stands right now. I mean, I got to preface by saying this list is going to be pared down with teams locking these guys up. But this is an all-star team. I mean, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Love, Tristan Wirfs. Tristan Wirfs is 25 years old. Like,
that's just crazy.
It feels like he's been around forever. DeForest Buckner, CeeDee Lamb, JOK from the Browns, 24 years old. Ayuk, Tua, Dak, Josh Allen of the Jags, Justin Reed, the safety of the Chiefs, Creed Humphrey, the 25-year-old center of the Chiefs. And when I mentioned that earlier to Gage, he was all over this signing. He thought that would be a good one.
Oh, yeah. Best center in the game, and you could poach him from a division rival. I doubt it happens because he's going to be one of the core guys the Chiefs want to lock up, but you never know, man. They've had to pay a lot of players. He might be the one they might have to say goodbye to.
Yeah, Jared Goff on the list, 29 years old. It felt like he was 35, but nope. Kenny Clark, AJ Terrell, Dre Greenlaw, Antoine Winfield Jr., T. Higgins, the one that I didn't love on the list, Quinn Miners.
A lot of wide receivers.
I know. Buda Baker, Nico Collins is on that list. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, this list just goes on and on. Chris Godwin. How old do you think Chris Godwin is?
29.
28. Like, again, feels like these guys have been in the league forever, and they still have a lot of tread left on these tires.
Yeah.
Well, this brings back something Cam brought up in the stream chat. We were talking about these guys, and maybe the Broncos could punt on wide receiver this year and target one of these wide receivers that could become available. I mean, we're already talking about guys like Justin Jefferson and Brandon Ayuk. They want their money right now, and there's been talks about them getting traded, but then and T. Higgins as well, who's going to be on a franchise tag this year. So there are some options if the Denver Broncos do want to go out and get a wide receiver one in free agency in 2025 with all of that money. Who knows? Maybe they don't take a receiver in the first round.
Well, yeah, and actually, if you look at it, there's some other phenomenal names that wasn't even mentioned, on that list. Mike Williams, who just recently signed with the Jets. I know he's 30 years old, but he's going to be a free agent, at the end of this. And we know the Jets are in a very shortened Super Bowl window with Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Cooks, he's 31, familiar with Sean Payton. We mentioned Chris Godwin, but you have Devontae Smith, 26 years old. He's got a club option, however. You have Jalen Waddle, club option. You have Robert Woods, 32 years old. But, of course, one that was the prize for me and possibly even considering trading for a guy like this, Juwan Jennings, the guy who was the restricted free agent for the San Francisco 49ers this year. He's an unrestricted free agent in 2025. CeeDee Lamb, obviously, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk. I mean, it's a really, really loaded room. And as far as like what you have, Tim Patrick, of course, if they wanted to bring back Tim Patrick for familiar names. I mean, like it's Nico. Did I see Nico Collins on here?
Nico Collins, 25 years old.
So,
and the Texans, man, they're going to have some decisions to make when it comes to paying some of their core guys. I imagine Nico's going to be one of those guys that they're going to want to lock up, but you never know, man. They're going to have to pay Stroud, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley. They have a lot of bills that are going to become due here pretty soon. So it's going to be interesting to see what they want to do with a guy like Nico Collins.
Well, and
use the term bills, and the bills are a perfect example of what happens when you have guys you need to lock up. I mean, they strip their team down, and unless you can get lightning to strike twice, it's really, really tough to keep these teams together. Once these rookie contracts start to expire.
Well, and as crazy as it is, you guys just mentioned the Bills. I mean, the Houston Texans room could look vastly different next year, because they stripped the contract of Stephon Diggs. So that makes him a free agent in the offseason as well. A guy that we didn't necessarily, maybe we mentioned, but Diggs and Nico Collins. Those are two wide receivers of their big three wide receiving core, that is going to be set to be a free agent. So depending on what happens with Houston, if they do take that step, which I think all of us expect, like they could be a very, very hot place, for some of these free agents to go. I mean, heck, if CeeDee Lamb was just so happens to, leave Dallas, why not stay in state, but go to the better team and go to a much younger team, with the Houston Texans. I mean, like it's a very realistic possibility, so, and of course, for the Broncos' sake, if they want to maybe right a few wrongs of the whole Jerry Jeudy situation and throw the bag at CeeDee Lamb, I think that would make everybody in Broncos country quite happy.
It would be funny if CeeDee Lamb ended up on the Texans because they would have basically stolen all the Cowboys' weapons. CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, all of them just heading east to Houston.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, we're at an hour and 10 minutes on a show that I was joking about would be the best 4 minutes on YouTube. But any closing thoughts, Cam? What do you have going on tomorrow night for your show?
Tomorrow, we are going to get a bit defensive. We're going to look at some defensive prospects. So it's kind of fitting that the edge rusher, is kind of a topic of discussion right now with the news and with the Broncos. We're going to talk about defensive prospects, and maybe the Broncos going out, maybe being interested in some safeties. Even still with the loss of Justin Simmons, and So we're going to talk about some of that, and maybe grinning and bearing the idea of them taking a cornerback at 12. So we'll talk about some defensive prospects.
Engage. What do you have coming up on Broncos Syndicate?
I just got my hands on some Bo Nix All 22, so we're going to be doing a Bo Nix film study.
He's turning the corner, ladies and gentlemen. Gage is turning the corner.
I love me some Bo Nix, man. I really do.
Thanks to everyone for a lively chat, and happy birthday, Boggins. Alex, welcome back to the mix. It's great to see you. Everybody else that joined in, we truly appreciate it. It helps it helps make this fun by getting input from people far and wide. Please check out all of the other shows on the MHRT network. Sports Nonsense and Whiskey was in the chat earlier. They're going on as well tonight, so check them out. But thank you so much, and by the time you see us next week, we'll have just a couple shows left before draft night. So thanks again, and have a wonderful evening.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out.